Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Sam here, trying to spin to win on Zwift. If you're new, I hope I'll sweat and suffer enough today to earn your subscription. And if you're a returning viewer, it is great to see you again. Before we start going over today's race, which is a club ladder race on the Roule Poule course in France, I wanted to quickly give you an update on where I've been for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Clearly, it's been very limited racing and no uploads of videos to YouTube. So my last race that I posted was actually on the 16th of July, which coincidentally was also on the Roule Poule course. That was stage 6, I believe, of the CISO tour. And that's when I posted my 5-minute power record. And I was probably in my best cycling shape, at least in the last 10 months since I started cycling on Zwift. So what happened? Well, a few days after that race, on the 16th of July, I came down with a nasty flu. I was laid out for a week, or probably even a few more days. I normally don't get ill very often, but when I do, I'm usually quite bad, and this was no exception. So really rough for about a week, and then it took me about, almost another week just to feel normal. Clearly, no exercise at all during this time. And then we decided as a family to do a very last minute trip to the sun in Tenerife for about 10 days. And if you've ever lived in Scotland for a period of time, you know that you need to see the sun at least once a year to have some sort of semblance of mental health. And then we got back, and I started to gently do a few rides, both inside and outside. But what I didn't expect was the impact that this forced break, if you will, had on my fitness. It was a massive impact. Normally, when I ride a zone 2, upper zone 2, I have about 125 to 130 beats per minute at an average of about 220 watts. My first zone 2 ride, when I got back a couple weeks ago, at 220 watts, I had about 150 to 155 beats on average. So 20-30 beats higher than just a few weeks before. And even though my heart rate has since come down a little bit as I've been doing some practicing, it is still almost 10 beats higher than it was just 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I thought for a while maybe it was something wrong with my heart rate monitor. I've tested it, and no, it's just I lost a lot of fitness in just a few weeks off the bike with 1 week of being ill. And I must admit, I was quite surprised at that. I thought I'd bounce back a lot faster. So perhaps it's just me, perhaps it's an age thing, but clearly that took a lot out of me, much more so than I expected. So I've had to reevaluate my my goals for Zwift races, at least for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Instead of trying to, really compete at the pointy end of races, now I'm more happy just to see if I can hold on to the front group, but hopefully we'll get back to peak fitness in the next 4 or 5 weeks. So I'd actually be very interested in your thoughts on the topic. Have you had something similar happen to you? If you did, let me know what the impact was, because again, for me, it was much higher than I expected. So, okay, enough of that. Before we take a look at today's race, like I said, a club ladder race, I have actually done 3 races prior to this, 3 club ladder races. I didn't get a chance to put together a video of each one, but I thought I'd give you a very quick montage of these 3 races now to see how I got on. As you can probably expect, given this long intro about me losing a lot of fitness, it was a bit of a mixed bag. But after that, we'll start reviewing today's race on Roule Poule course. The first comeback race took place on 20th of August on the Rolling Highlands course against Team Vikings Yme. As my first race back, I wasn't expecting too much. I just wanted to hang on to the front if I could, and if I was there at the end, well, you never know what can happen in the sprint. As I roll footage here approaching the final ascent up the breakaway brae, there was not too much to say about this race as it was relatively straightforward. While both teams pushed a bit on the various bumps during the race, the rest of the race was very relaxed. And apart from one section where one of my teammates unfortunately lost the front group, there were no real selections during the race. I just tried to draft as much as I could to make sure I saved my energy, to stay with the front group and also to be able to have a go at the final sprint. The beginning of the final breakaway brae ascent was calm, with nobody really pushing on from the start, and I hit my draft power up with about 500 meters to go, and then I tried to draft as much as I can. I will let the footage roll on here so you see how we get on. With about 250 meters to go, two of my teammates starts pushing harder, and I decide to follow at that point. And as you will see, they almost act like a perfect lead-out train for me, and I'm able to sprint for the win at the end. I cross the line just as my power-up is done. That has to be one of my better uses for it now that I think of it. I was really surprised to win the race, but it was just not hard enough to expose my lack of fitness. And again, I had enough to win the sprint finish. But as you will see, things were very different in the next comeback race. The second comeback race took place on 22nd of August on the downtown Dolphins course against Team Dirt Spellbound. It took place over 11 laps of the course. Looking at the opposition, I knew this would likely be a hard race for me, as they looked very strong on paper. And as it was a crit race, there would be a lot of hard, short efforts with limited recovery. Again, my goal was just to hang on as long as I could and see what I could do at the end if I was there. We joined the action at the end of the 5th lap of the race. And the race has turned out as I expected, with both teams pushing hard on the one climb on each lap, but the other team also pushed hard at the start of each lap. And these constant short but really hard efforts had taken its toll on me, and I'm already at the limit here as the footage starts. Thus, when the elastic snaps, as you can see on the screen now, it came as no surprise to me. Unlike the first comeback race, this race was hard from the start, and it really exposed my lack of fitness. I gave it my best, but I could only stay with the front for 6 of the 11 laps. Having said that, looking at the numbers at the end of the race, I wonder whether I could have stayed with the front group even if I was at my best, as there were some very, very strong riders there from each team. The third comeback race took place on 27th of August over 4 laps of the London Classic course against Team Backpedal 2. Having now had a few more days of training and racing under my belt, I was hoping I would be a bit more competitive. Again, the teams looked pretty matched on paper, so I knew it would likely to be an even race. As we joined the action towards the end of the race, it has been quite a tactical affair by both teams. While there are no major climbs on the course, there are enough bumps where if you push hard enough, you can sometimes catch people off guard. Both teams sent attacks off the front throughout the race, which had to be covered, but in the end my team managed somewhat better, and we were able to drop 2 racers from the opposition towards the end of the 3rd lap. As we approached the final sprint, Both teams sit up just a bit to get a final bit of rest. And at this point, I have no power up left. So my plan was just to draft as long as I could and then hopefully put in a dig with about 150 meters or so to go. However, as usual, things don't go to plan, and one of my teammates, Kim, goes with about 500 meters. And this forces the rest of the competitors to respond. Kim, however, is a very strong sprinter, and that is the last we see of him as he blasts off for a relatively easy sprint win. I follow the rest and then start my sprint with about 200 meters to go. I managed to pass most of the rest of the competitors, but I'm pipped on the line by little Ian from the other team, and I finished third. I was happy with this result, and I was now starting to feel a bit stronger after having a few more races under my belt, as well as some decent training. Today's race is a club ladder race between my team, Team Swedish Swifters Bifrost, and Valhalla Hoors. The race is taking place on the Roule by Poule course in France, and the power-ups in play are Aero, Draft, and Feather. I will discuss the course more in a second, but first I wanted to look at how the teams stack up against each other prior to the race. This page shows how strong teams are relative to each other over different time frames, from 5 seconds all the way up to 30 minutes. The top part of the page shows all the hard data, such as height, weight, and your watts per kilo over different time frames, with the bottom showing a graphical representation of this data, and this is where we'll focus our attention. My team's data is at the top of the graph in blue, with Valhalla Hoors at the bottom in pink. But the key is the middle dotted black line, which shows the relative strength of the teams against each other for each time period. In this case, it shows that while the teams are generally evenly matched, the opposition is a bit stronger over 10-second sprints, as well as efforts over 5 minutes. It should be noted that the figures use the best efforts of the riders over the last 90 days, and as we know, you can gain or lose a lot of fitness in that time. So this is a rough indication only, but I find it really useful to look at in order to start planning a strategy for the race. And in this case, any way you look at it, it will be a tough race against an opposition who has the same average weight as my team, but looks to be a bit stronger overall. Now, let's have a quick look at today's course, as it is quite tough. Looking at the map, you would think that the course starts with a nice downhill section. However, that is not the case. The lead into this course, which doesn't show up on the route map in front of you, is actually really tough and consists of a climb up the Petite Combe right from the start pen. I bet you this has caught out quite a few racers who expected that downhill start, but instead were climbing hard before they knew what was really going on. As such, this race will start out with a bang. It is then very flat until the final climb, with the exception of a small bump in the middle as you come over the Aqueduct Combe. As I show some footage of the start of the race, I wanted to quickly discuss our team's strategy for the race. The plan was to go reasonably hard up the first climb, straight from the lead-in, to see how the other team would respond. If we were able to drop any of the opposition, that would of course be great. And if we were able to get a couple of our team off the front, that would also be a good scenario. If these two plans didn't pan out, however, then we just plan to sit on the other team throughout the rest of the race, cover any attacks, and then have a go at the final climb. As mentioned in the team comparison earlier, Valhalla Hoors is a very strong team, so it was always likely that the last scenario would be what would happen. We will now skip ahead slightly to see how we get on the lead-in climb. We joined the action after about 3 minutes of the race. We're not quite halfway up the climb yet, and the pace has not been too bad so far. I decided at this point to push on a bit to see how the other team would respond. I'm taking turns with my teammate Brian at the front, but then all of a sudden my connection drops and I lose sight of all the other racers. This unfortunately kept going on and off for the rest of the climb, so I was just trying to keep pedaling, and I was asking my teammates on Discord whether they could see me and what position I was at. It certainly made for an interesting start of the race, that is for sure. I will fast forward here so you can see what happens during the rest of the climb. As we go over the top of the first climb and my connection finally comes back so I can see what's going on, we can see that all 10 of us are still together as we descend down towards the flat section of the course. I was a bit gassed at this point, so it was good to get some rest down the hill. For the rest of the flat section, including the small aqueduct comb, the race was very relaxed. Apart from a couple small attacks from either team, the pace was really slow, and it seemed like both teams realized it would come down to a race up the last climb. The one thing we did note, however, during this part of the race was that one member of the opposition team, Alex, seemed to struggle somewhat with each acceleration, so our hope was that we could hopefully drop him at the start of the last climb and make it a 5 versus 4 up the hill. With that, we'll now skip forward until the start of the last climb. We rejoined the action with around 1 kilometer left of the final climb. Unfortunately, it seems like one of the opposition, Vegard, has dropped out of the race, probably due to a connection drop on his side. But the 9 of us left are still together at this point. The pace up the climb to this point has been hard but steady, but I am starting to feel the effort. At this point, Simon from the other team starts pushing quite hard, and the rest of us has to try to stay with him. For me, I'm just trying to stay as steady as I can, so even though I'm pushing hard, I'm trying to avoid ups and downs in my power output. At this point, Håkan on our team go to the front and pushes pretty hard, and this is where we see Alex on the other team, among others, start to lose the group. I hit my feather at this point and push a little harder to stay with the front of the group, as we are all pushing close to 6 watts per kilo at this point. I then find myself at the front of the race before Akihiro from the other team goes ahead. And I knew he would be very strong on this climb, as he has a very high 5-minute power, and he's also relatively lightweight at around 66 kilo. So I knew I had to do my best to try to stay on his wheel as long as I could. I will fast forward here slightly until we get to around 200 meters to go. As we approach the finish line, I am at my limit, but I hope that Akihiro is also. I know that the last 50 meters or so is slightly downhill, so I try to get in his draft before kicking and hopefully gain a small gap as we go over the top. And then I'm hoping that my higher weight will help me in the last bit of the finish. As you will see, that is what happens, and I managed to win the race just ahead of Akihiro, with the rest coming in just behind us. To finish the video off, let's have a quick look at the ZwiftPower results. Looking at the results, the one thing that stands out to me is the 5-minute power figures. 6 of us had 4.9 watts per kilo or higher during the race. I can only assume this came on the last climb. For me, this matched my previous best 5-minute power record, and I think at least a few of the other racers got 5-minute power PBs today. In summary, this was a really fun, if hard, race, and I wanted to say chapeau to all of us really for a good climbing effort at the end of the race. For me specifically, I was surprised at my level of performance at the end, and it seems like perhaps I've finally started to get over the lingering effects of my recent illness and break from the bike. And I'm looking forward to see where I can go from here. I will end the video there. Thanks for watching until the end. It was a bit of a long one, but hopefully interesting. Please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me trying to build this tiny corner of the YouTube verse. And if you have any comment suggestions, please put them in the comments below. I will read them for sure. This is Sam, trying to spin to win on Zwift. Bye for now.